everyone. Welcome to the Economic Development Innovation Committee meeting. We have one item on our agenda today. It is the TC 1221, the text change for accessory commercial units. I know we've got some folks here who want to speak, so I think what we will do is we will hear from staff first and get the presentation. Then we'll open it up for comments, and then we'll take it to the council table for questions and direction.
All right, thank you, Chair Melton, members of the committee. I'm John Anagnos from Planning and Development. There are a lot of slides in this presentation, so I'll try to move through them quickly. And I'll just preface it by saying there's three basic sections of this presentation. There's going to be a part one where we talk about the original draft ordinance that came from staff, a part two where I talk about what the Planning Commission recommended changing about that ordinance, and a part three which is a staff proposed alternative to sort of reconcile those two different things. So this text change dates from last summer. You saw a version of it, that original staff draft ordinance last fall before it went to the Planning Commission. And so there are some existing accessory commercial uses that are allowed in residential districts, in residential buildings. Those are called home occupation, live work, and then home daycare. So home occupation is intended to be the most minimal of those. Basically should not be any outward appearance on the building that there's a business taking place inside. And there's also a pretty restrictive maximum amount of floor area within the residential building that could take up. Home occupation is allowed without a special use permit. It is a zoning permit that's basically a pretty quick form and a small fee at the planning office. Live work has more of an external appearance. These are allowed already in the zoning code. Does require a special use permit, but does allow employees or customers to visit the business. It does also allow some exterior signage and vehicles associated with the business to be parked on the site. So a little bit more exterior appendages, but also requiring the special use permit. So the original draft ordinance developed by staff was to basically remove home occupation, remove the special use permit requirement for live work, essentially having live work take the place of home occupation, being only requiring a zoning permit from administrative approval at that point, and then a new use called accessory commercial unit, which would be more extensive, more outward appearance than live work, but would have additional regulations. And so the original ordinance, again, and this is basically what would the accessory commercial unit be allowed to do. So you would not have a special use permit. You would be allowed to have it an accessory structure, and you would not have a cap on the number of customers or employees set by the zoning. It would be set by the fire code. Also, there would only be one ACU per lot. It would be a maximum floor area, hours of operation. The uses were clarified. So live, work, and home occupation define the uses differently than in other places in the zoning code. So clarifying the use definitions. And then no outdoor seating, allowing service areas or mechanical areas, but having them be screened. Lighting controls, outdoor display, having a maximum area. Not requiring vehicle parking, but requiring bicycle parking, allowing a building sign, and allowing a vehicle. So that was the original ordinance. And so the main differences between what would have been allowed in that original ordinance and ACU and what had previously been defined as live work was basically the removal of that maximum number of employees and customers, and then also additional signage allowed. But otherwise, pretty similar in the allowed uses. So Planning Commission saw this item and basically had a lot of input from the public that came both through the engagement portal, the online survey, also the Ask a Planner meetings that we held, and then direct communication with the Planning Commission through email or public comment. And in response to that, the Planning Commission recommended several changes. So the recommendation of Planning Commission was basically to keep home occupation as a zoning permit allowed use, so no special use permit there, but the same standards, and then basically to combine live, work, and accessory commercial unit. So to take that new use that this had originally proposed to create and just kind of merge it into live, work, and find some kind of medium between the two of them. And so the changes that they decided to make or recommended to make was to further define the allowed uses and restrict those beyond the original ordinance, And so in particular, personal service and indoor recreation. So those are pretty broad definitions in the UDO. And so, there are a number of things that can go in there. So personal service, as you can see here, can include things like tattoo parlor. Indoor recreation can be things like wedding chapel. And so basically, Planning Commission wanted to really specify exactly what those types of terms would mean. Additionally, Planning Commission recommended defining a new use called food retail. And that was in response to public comment that the sale of alcohol and tobacco in a retail use in an accessory commercial unit would not be desirable. And so that was an attempt to basically define a new use that would state that the primary purpose of the retail use would be for selling food. And then there were some other allowances for retail if the retail was tied to the repair or production of products on the site. So if someone's manufacturing clothing, jewelry, those kinds of things on site, that type of sale would also be allowed. Planning Commission wanted to recommended reducing the hours of operation, increase the lighting controls to essentially refer to another portion of the zoning code, remove the allowance for outdoor display, reduce the amount of signage, and then but because they wanted to merge the live, work, and ACU uses into this kind of hybrid use, they also wanted to bring back the special use permit requirement. And that special use permit typically legally should have some form of subjective criteria because that's the whole purpose of the Board of Adjustment being involved in the first place. If the reason to have a quasi-judicial process is because there is some standard that the development is having to meet which cannot be objectively reviewed by an administrative staff person. And so Planning Commission recommended bringing these two criteria from the current live work standards that are somewhat subjective. So you see the term excessive in both of these standards. Excessive does not carry with it any prescriptive measurement. It is really the judgment in the case of current live work standards of the Board of Adjustment of what excessive means. Okay, so the Planning Commission, recommendation basically added a lot of the new regulations that were introduced for ACUs to the live work use, but kept the special use permit of the live work use. So that's a kind of a brief summary of what the Planning Commission recommendation was.
Hang on.
Yes.
Can you go back there, Mr. Chairman, real fast to that?
You want to let him get, he's going to come.
I just want to make sure so the PC recommendation is the middle, is the red one, the live work?
Yeah, well, basically what you see here is, the Planning Commission recommendation is, well, it's what's on this column, the column ACU is basically the Planning Commission
Is their version?
recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
And so here you can see the comparison of the allowed uses. And then what we heard from the public, these were a lot of the concerns, but basically, if there's going to be businesses late at night, especially if it's a restaurant, if that restaurant serves alcohol, people could be there after business hours. If people are coming to these businesses, they would park on the street, which would be competition for residential street parking, and a number of other things. All right, so staff have identified a few alternatives for the committee's benefit. So one of them would be basically to carry forward a lot of the same regulations that are in the Planning Commission recommendation, but to make it make that use allowed without a special use permit. And then some other options which are more long-term, which would be to consider rezoning in specific areas through an overlay or base district rezoning to allow commercial uses in closer proximity to residential areas. So the staff proposal, so this is part 3 of the presentation, would be basically taking the regulations that were introduced by the original staff ordinance and then expanded by the Planning Commission, applying them to live work, keeping home occupation, and basically saying that in return for having these additional, more restrictive regulations on live work, that is a compromise for removing the special use permit requirement that currently applies to live work.
May I ask a question about the special use permit? How long, well, first off, how much does the special use permit cost? How long does it take to get one?
So the fee for a special use permit, I believe, is in the range of $200 to $300. And then there is a requirement that you submit your application, I believe it's either 60 or 90 days before the actual meeting where the item would be heard. And so, depending on whether it actually gets action on the first meeting at the Board of Adjustment, that's probably a 4 to 5, potentially 6-month process. And then in addition to the fee that the city charges, it is very common for applicants for a special use permit or really any Board of Adjustment business to obtain the services of an attorney. So then attorney fees would also usually become a part of that.
Does anybody do a special use permit that's staff-driven as opposed to BOA-driven? And is that something we could consider?
Not sure I quite understand the question.
So in other words, instead of it going to the Board of Adjustment, could there be some type of permit process that goes to staff?
Yes, that's basically what was proposed in the original draft ordinance from staff and in this compromise or kind of substitute proposal that I'm going through. It would be an administrative approval by staff that would not involve the Board of Adjustment. But the key thing to keep in mind with that is, number one, the standards have to be objective. So there has to be a clear cut, is this conforming or not conforming to the standards? So you cannot write standards that say things like excessive because the judgment of that is legally not allowed to be done by staff. The second aspect of it is that there would not be public input. So the Board of Adjustment in the special use permit process does allow what amounts to public testimony. Now that testimony does have to be, is strongly encouraged to be factual. So, it distinguish it from a rezoning process where a person can come to public comment period for rezoning and just say, I don't like this and I just think it's bad. And that's a totally valid comment for a rezoning. With a special use permit, it is really narrowly meant to be what is an objective fact about a potential impact of this development that is going to affect your property or your quality of life.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get to is, I know there's a lot of concerns from people about vaping guns. We've seen the emails, we've heard it all. How do we prevent those types of businesses from happening and encourage the types of business that we've talked about, such as, dance studios, yoga studios, whatever? So that's my question.
The crux of the answer to that question is that if the city is going to allow a retail use, then the city is basically prohibited by state law from curtailing that retail use by specifying some restriction on the sale of alcohol or tobacco. Basically, state law supersedes or preempts local jurisdiction to say that basically the way that you would avoid that is to prohibit the retail sales use entirely. Otherwise, you do pretty much, the state law is going to control.
And so state law also allows gun sales from homes?
I'd have to ask the city attorney about that.
So the preemption comes into the retail sales category. So if an area is zoned to allow retail sales generally, then we're preempted from regulations of alcohol, tobacco, or firearms.
And prevented from regulation also means prevented from prohibiting.
That's correct. If other retail sales are allowed.
Okay. Because I think really that's sort of the crux of what we're trying to figure out today, because, and I'm interrupting your, how many more slides do you have left?
Probably about 5.
Well, let's get through them and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So-
I had to process this
Yeah.
before I could see the rest.
Okay, and this will be pretty familiar because, again, this is basically just bringing in the standards from the staff proposal and the Planning Commission recommendation. So the staff proposed alternative option would be to have live work be allowed through an administrative permit approval, not a special use permit. Hours of operation would be controlled. It would be allowed an accessory structure or accessory dwelling unit. Require screening, require lighting to be controlled. allow signs, but smaller signs than what came out of the Planning Commission or the original draft. This portion is really speaking almost directly to the building code. This was a question that came up a lot in the public review process, which was, even if this is allowed by zoning, is it not going to be prohibited by the not prohibited, but be very difficult to convert an existing residential structure to commercial building code? There are specific exemptions in the building code that North Carolina uses for what is titled a live-work use, where you can have a business use that is considered accessory to a residential building. And in that sense, then there are exemptions for many of the commercial building code requirements, particularly having to do with fire suppression. Clarifying what uses are allowed. And so the staff proposal was to remove the retail use for the reason that you just discussed, and then that clarification of personal service and indoor recreation. This is the conversation we just had.
So staff's proposal would be remove the retail use, but allow all other types of, so if we remove the retail use, people wouldn't be able to sell, well, really anything, I guess, but it would be more personal services, so like a CPA, hairdresser, I don't know, I'm blanking, there we go. And then to do that through just a simple sort of permit, streamline, and not special use.
That's right.
Okay. If we wanted to incorporate retail, could we do that through a separate, keep that in a special use permit pipeline, and then do everything else through this sort of by right streamlined way?
I think that's technically possible.
And I'll just jump to what I was talking about before. I saw from an earlier slide about stated goals for this proposal, and I saw it when it came to us at the council table. I think we had a discussion in this committee early on about food deserts and access to foods. And ACUs, I think, came out as part of that discussion, but that is not the sole purpose, I think, of accessory commercial units. I think the real benefit is really trying to reduce car dependency, build a more sustainable, resilient city so you don't have to drive everywhere to get what you need. We also talked a lot about like helping our small businesses get started. And I think we saw during COVID that a lot of folks pivoted to starting their own businesses, home-based businesses. And if you can't afford a truck or a brick and mortar store, this is where you're gonna get your startup. And a lot of folks are already doing this, they just don't realize it's not allowed. And so if we have an avenue forward where we can incorporate some neighborhood-oriented retail into our existing neighborhoods to where maybe to get your haircut, you're not getting in your car and driving, you're going down the street and your barber's in your neighborhood. That's one less vehicle mile traveled. And the only way we're going to place goods and services closer to people is for new developments, looking at mixed use, dense, walkable, and for our existing neighborhoods, finding ways to incorporate neighborhood small-scale types of services. And that is how I think ACUs will be most beneficial. And if we have to sort of have one stream if you want to sell retail, and then one stream if you want to do everything else that's easier, then I could support that. But I don't want to make this overly complicated, and I think we were heading in that direction. And so those are just my general thoughts. How many more slides do we have?
I just had a last two slides of just saying that there are some other long-term options that would have to do with rezoning if the text change approach was not, feasible.
How many folks are here to talk on this? Could you raise your hand? 2,
4.
4. Okay.
5.
Was it 5? I sound 4. 2 and 2, 3. Mr. Neptune? No? Okay. All right.
You're not talking?
So 4.
That'll be a first.
Why don't we hear from y'all, and then we'll go through this, take it back to the table. But why don't we just, I don't know, 2-3 minutes a person? Do you want to come up and just everyone start migrating this way? All 4 of you. Over here to the podium. Just give them 3 minutes. I think you volunteered.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you say? We approved. Okay, thanks. I
had to write my stuff down because I was scared I was going to lose my words.
Okay.
I think that, though, I need some clarification to start off because
You may, real quick, can you pull that? Yeah, that was, you touching that had nothing to do with that noise happening. If you could pull that closer to your, there, because then they can hear you at home, and it is helpful if you give us your name.
yes. Hi, my name is Crystal Blaylock G, and I'm a resident of District C at 209 Haywood Street. And I wanted to ask about some of the allowable uses. I had a question originally. Well, first off, I'm in my final month of clinic to become a licensed massage and bodywork therapist, and I would like to be able to open a licensed massage and bodywork therapist in an ACU, hopefully in my neighborhood. So I'm in support of this, of ACUs, not only for like the potential opportunities it will give me, but also my neighborhood. I wanted to mention that massage parlors are currently listed as non-allowable personal service. So I would like clarification that licensed massage and bodywork therapists are not and will not be associated with massage parlors. Licensed massage and bodywork therapists are licensed and regulated through the state as a medical and allied occupation and adhere to strict professional and ethical codes. And you can find these codes in regulating practices in Article 36 of Chapter 90 of the state general statutes, which I emailed you a link to, Jonathan. Additionally, and I would like to see the term massage parlor just removed from the text. From a perspective of the city, it's a dated and a disappointing regulatory term. And as an individual in the massage and bodywork profession, association with that term is derogatory because it implies an additional service of an illegal nature that already should not exist in the city. So basically, in review, I want to see, I would like to see licensed massage and bodywork therapists and their practices to be included as an allowable service, allowable use for ACUs, and then I'd also like to see the term massage parlor removed from the text entirely because it's not only defamatory language for us as professionals, but also implies services of a nature which is already non-allowable. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for me?
Do we have questions? And I did get your emails, and we corresponded briefly, so I appreciate you flagging this issue, and I think we all learned a little bit of something about your industry, and that was very helpful, so thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay? Don't be shy. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lisa Hewitt, and I live at 712 Hinsdale Street. I had a whole piece prepared to talk to today, but now I'm so confused as to what I saw. I didn't see any staff recommendations prior to the meeting, so I'm kind of like up in the air. A lot of my comments had to do with the retail sales and how problematic that is and the fact that the city can't regulate it. So I'm glad that you're moving in that direction. And it's interesting to hear you talk about how food deserts became part of this, and all the meetings with the Planning Commission talked about. There's a disconnect. I don't see how this is going to handle food deserts. So I'm glad to see the clarification on that. My main concern really is ruining the character of our neighborhoods. I really like the fact that we have a residential neighborhood and not a mixed-use kind of district. But I appreciate people, like Crystal was saying, about having the ability to have body massage therapy in one's home, because really you can only handle one client at a time. I've got a neighbor who would like to do acupuncture in her home, and I would like to see that. So those kinds of personal services, I think, are already ongoing. They may not know that they have to go through a permit process for that. So I would agree that what Mayor Baldwin was saying about reducing the process and maybe the expense of streamlining such as those services, but like John was saying, make sure you have very objective standards so that staff can be consistent in what they're applying. That sounds like a really good compromise. As far as the special use permit, now I'm not sure where that falls in all of this. The reason that I was happy that the Planning Commission put it back in was because it gave the public, it gave us an opportunity to be aware of what's going on, because there's so much complexity in what's going on in Raleigh with all of the rezoning and the text changes, that just another opportunity to find out about what's happening through the special permit process would give us an opportunity to be professional about what we'd like to see in our neighborhoods, rather than confronting our neighbor, which really nobody likes to do. And I will leave with this, one last question. Would this include a hookah bar? Because,
No, we don't want hookah bars. We already have one. That's a huge problem.
and that's where I live. in that
Mr.
neighborhood.
Poole, correct me, but hookah would be under retail?
Yeah, that falls under vaping.
Yeah, that's probably a zoning interpretation question. I'm
Because
seeing.
it could be a cafe.
Yeah, I don't think you can zone them out.
Thank you, that was helpful, yes.
A hookah bar is there it goes again.
It's nothing, I don't know
I
why
think I
that.
did that one. A hookah bar is classified as a restaurant, bar, tavern,
Got it,
lounge.
okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, who's next? We got two more.
Hey, Jen, you want to come up? So,
Sorry, I'm
Thank you.
short.
You're good.
Hi, all. I'm Jennifer Irvin Kochman. I live in District D. I'm just a citizen who became aware of this on my own when there was a special use permit going on my street, an issue. And I kind of think that we're all on the same page, but that there's a lot of discrepancy in terms of public input, because there's this false narrative that is out on social media right now saying that small businesses don't have a legal right to operate, and it's all pro-business. But I don't know anybody who's not pro-small business in this issue. Everybody is. I seriously, out of anybody, I don't know anyone who isn't. And, the UDO since 2013 has allowed for home occupation businesses, has allowed for all of this. This is nothing but an expansion, which is fine, except that with the input from the text committee, the text change committee, every single person unanimously on that text change committee, and I sat in on the meetings, they voted unanimously that they did not want vaping products, cannabis, tobacco, or alcohol. Now, I don't know how it ended up at 25% retail in the bill. Maybe it was a technical thing, but I don't understand that, because if you look at small places like Councilman Melton, I know you were encouraging places like, I was thinking of the Community Deli on Oberlin Road, because you can walk to there. Well, they don't sell any of those, but they sell food. Like, why would that be a requirement? And I think that you're going to have a lot of angry parents and homeowners and realtors, realtor associations. The other thing is that I'm proud to say that I am a Raleighite who's attracted to this wonderful city like everybody other proud Raleigheites, because it does have residential neighborhoods, and they are mixed. They are not just, again, false narrative. They are not just single-family homes. We have all sorts of homes in my neighborhood. We have apartments, we have condos, we have fourplexes and duplexes and triplexes. That's all part of residential. And I can walk to my neighborhood things where I am, and yet this is inequitable. Anyone with a homeowners association is not affected. We're moving towards equity in the city. This is the opposite of that. And finally, the text change committee unanimously said we have to keep special use permits. They're only used for extreme circumstances. The sale of firearms and guns is extreme. You don't want it next door. You don't want your kids in a neighborhood with that. It's a federal law. You can't permit it the only way to get rid of it is to have special use permits. It's a little bit to ask in order to be able to sell a cake from your home, to not allow guns. And I'm telling you, I know I'm going over, but I don't think that residents are going to be happy with that. That's really important. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to clarify, because I don't think any of us want that. I mean, we are trying to find a way forward on this that does not
Right.
also allow
I
guns
agree,
and
but,
vapes. So
when you're making a compromise, I think the issue of guns is probably over the issue of like selling cakes, even though I'd love to be able to do it
Yeah.
all. No, like we all support that.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, it is truly a residential neighborhood, even if it's mixed use. And commercial business cannot come over, it's a residentially zoned neighborhood. So that's first and foremost. Thank you.
Last one.
Hey, y'all. Jen Truman, 1928 Sierra Drive. I have been trying to quell some of the misinformation around what's allowed and not allowed for the last couple months on this issue. I talked to you guys in committee virtually, so it's good to be here to see you guys. But the fact is, and I really appreciate staff's effort in finding a middle ground here, because the fact is that home occupation doesn't allow small businesses to have clients or customers visit their business. And I don't know about you guys, but it's really hard to run a small business if you can't do that. You have to do those things outside of the home. And what we see is that we don't enforce the rules that are on the books for having those small businesses when they do have customers or clients come. So if you've ever done a porch pickup for jelly, elderberry syrup, or pie, if you've ever dropped your taxes off at your accountant's house to have them done, you've actually participated in an illegal activity. And I think that's the thing that's driving the rule change, right? Home occupation doesn't allow those things, but people are doing it. And for me, I think that we need an objective standard that allows some of those things to happen. The agriculture department, multiple licensing boards for beauticians. I just learned massage therapists by listening today. Like, there are licensing agencies that believe that these things can safely happen in residential homes. The building code allows it because it can safely happen in residential homes. There are multiple other licensing checks for these things to happen. Our zoning code is a small barrier, but it is still a barrier. And the reality is that a special use permit can also be a barrier. It's actually a requirement that businesses that are going for a special use permit hire an attorney to represent them. A homeowner can represent themselves, but a business cannot. That's in our city code. So I'm not a lawyer, I don't make lawyer money, but if you wanted to get a special use permit for your business, that's what you would have to pay. And it's multiple thousands of dollars from what I've seen mutual clients of mine have to do to get a special use permit. So I'm here to say that I think we really do need the compromise. I think we really do need to have the hard conversation about which businesses can be in our neighborhoods, and we need to find a way to do it in order to support our neighbors in their efforts. And I'll just end by quoting an article from Strong Towns from a couple years ago at the beginning of the pandemic. It says, "This segregated model of development is at odds with the fiscal realities of small and micro businesses. It's at odds with changing consumer preferences, and it runs counter to the challenges and aspirations of 21st century cities." It's really important that we make some changes to get these rules right, and I'm glad that you guys are taking the time to do that. Thanks, y'all.
Okay, Councilmember Branch, I saw you grab your mic first. We haven't heard from you yet.
So I have a couple things. First, I want to talk about the hours of operation. To me, that's very important that we understand how late a business in a residential community can run. The state hasn't changed our daylight savings laws or anything like that. So in the wintertime, 8 o'clock is dark. I really think it should be 6. If it's a business, especially with professional services, maybe it should run like a business. Especially my major issue is because they're in residential communities. Anyone that has small kids, y'all can imagine what it's like trying to put kids to sleep at night. But your next door neighbor is running people in and out, whatever business they have. I'm just keeping it honest and straight here.
So if one person walks up to somebody's door and gets
it's
to
not
get a
about one
massage,
because it depends on the type of business.
if we're talking personal services, though.
No, we've talked about professional services, food retail.
The retail thing, I think, is out.
We taught a gauntlet, but
So,
of things. So what are we saying going forward? Are we saying retail is out? I heard food retail mentioned. Are we saying food retail is out? And are we strictly talking now about professional services?
This is how I think we move forward on this. Okay. Yeah, ma'am, sorry, we're gonna take it to the table. We do appreciate all the comments, but we're gonna try to And then this has to go for public hearing anyway, so there'll be plenty of time for everyone. It'll be set in June. Until we have some more flexibility in state law, and if there were a way to allow this by right but carve out some of the unintended negative consequences that I think are really going to upset some folks, like guns and vaping and stuff like that, I don't see how we move forward on that issue by right now. What I would like to do is take staff's recommendation on streamlining all the personal services and then do a separate ACU special use permit just for retail. And then that lets it go to the Board of Adjustments, and there can be some, if a deli, like the deli wants to open and they have their model and they're already going to opt to not sell certain things, then that may get through. But I think the streamline by right allow needs to be personal services. And then we can, then for the ACUs for retail, I think that has to stay with the special use permit.
So can I ask this, though,
Yeah.
before I can get on board with that? With the special use permit, would that prohibit anybody from can we prohibit somebody from opening something that we don't want? So guns, hookah bar, whatever. I mean, none of us want to see that coming to neighborhoods, and I just want to make sure if we were going to go that route with a special use permit, that the special use permit could be used to say no. And then the
You're
other.
asking for a black and white answer from a lawyer. This is risky.
We can look into that specific question further, but I would think at first blush, it would be prohibited to have a prohibition outright as part of a special use permit. I think
But it would be the Board of Adjustments making that subjective determination.
if the Board of Adjustment made a determination that the subjective standards could not be met with certain types of use, then we could look into that. But I think generally we would not be able to have anything that exempted the uses or created prohibitions on the uses.
So could I recommend this? Could we just look at the personal services piece and
And
maybe
hold the
take,
retail
and
stuff.
hold the retail, just take that out? Because what we might want to do is approach the legislature potentially and saying, could we do something like this, but blah, blah, blah.
I could get behind
That is if we got consensus.
That's fine. And my other question, if we can have, because we're going to have another committee meeting before the hearing, correct?
I don't think so, because
When's the public hearing?
it's the first meeting in June, but we have to recommend out to council what version of this is going to be on post. So I think at our next meeting, we have to have council vote on the recommendation
Okay.
of what the hearing. So I think we got to do this today.
So that part's fine, but I think I would like to have some more information around professional services and what the state laws require for some of them, because you can have a salon in your home, but there are certain state requirements from a health code standard in order to do it. You may be a massage therapist, but there may be some state law requirements that require it. So if some of the state law requirements may cause some conflict or some uneasiness in what we're doing, I would like to know what those are ahead of time with some of our professional services that we're talking about. And I don't think it's against, no offense, but I don't think it's against the law to drop off my tax papers to someone's house.
But, hey, sorry. So what I'm hearing then is we're going to proceed with well, now do we do the original draft ordinance or staff recommendation just on personal services? And we're going to keep retail out for now because we don't have any flexibility with state law.
Right.
Right.
Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, so I just need to know, I think to Councilor Branch's point, is what is included within personal services? Are we going to call it personal services or are we going to call it professional services? And what types or lines of business are included in that? Because I don't know what they are. And I think there are a lot, which is fine and great. And then also, I do agree, I think we should not move forward at all on retail until we know a lot more, get a lot more clarification and understanding on the retail side. Okay, and then also while I'm talking, I agree with Councilman Branch's approach on the hours, as well as we haven't talked about out signage. I think should only be displayed on the building itself, and some sort of limitation as to the size of that signage. And then here is I guess, is this the the
Yeah.
definition or what's included under personal services?
Well, it's, we would do everything on the left and then personal services without, and then they listed the exceptions. No animal care, dry cleaning, funeral home, funeral parlor, tattoo parlor. They've
So we're
carved
gonna
out, I
delete-
guess, some of
okay,
it. No
so-
wedding, I don't know why wedding chapel, but all right. And then just,
Well, why no animal care either?
yeah, what's up with that? Yeah.
So there are two types of animal care defined in the UDO. There's animal care that is entirely indoor, and there's another form that allows outdoor keeping of animals. And so those do have different standards. I think part of the desire is just that whether it's an indoor or outdoor animal care that would be allowed in an accessory commercial unit or live work, whatever the case may be, that animals do tend to make noise. And so that could be an impact on neighboring residents. And also, just there are other, disposal of refuse, storage of food products for animals. I mean, it is a pretty intensive operation to run animal care.
And
I
we
know
can't,
that-
and we can't differentiate
can I get back
between
to- I mean,
animals.
Wait a minute,
Let me
I
finish.
know people who run doggy daycare out of their house and dog sitting.
Well, it's
So-
at council's discretion.
Is there a limitation on how many dogs any people can own?
Own, we mean care for?
Care for.
What?
You
said
mean like
own.
if it's an animal care, but how many people they can
comparing
have?
animal
Yeah.
care to.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, I know people that own a lot of dogs, and is there a limitation within the city limits? I know you're supposed to actually have a permit, aren't you? Or you have to have
dog?
something that's, you're supposed to let the city knows that you own and that
you have a kennel.
own.
I think Councilmember Knight is asking, in simple terms, why do we maybe care about people pet sitting multiple animals if someone in their neighborhood could literally just buy 15 dogs? He's asking, is there a limit on the number of pets you can have in the city of Raleigh?
Is there? Well,
I don't know.
staff.
I'm not certain we can get back to you on that.
Yeah, just find that for me. Okay. So, and then also in this list, I'm going to stand up for the tattoo industry. They may not like to be called parlors either. I have a feeling, even though I don't have a tattoo, and I've actually never been in one, but I think we need to look at that language as well. And then I guess why not? I mean, that seems like a kind of an outdated vision of tattoo parlors, but why can't somebody give tattoos in there if they have a license to be a tattoo artist? Is that the right word?
Or body piercing, for that matter.
Yeah. If it's all
Let's
legal.
do this real quick. I think we're getting very in the weeds on,
Wait a minute, could we
Well,
get
I
an
am,
answer, though?
but I also want to make
we
sure
get an
what is within the definition of personal or professional services, or under this definition. So that, I mean, it
health
is
issue.
applicable. But if they're going to come back with this, then that's fine too.
what did you want him to know?
Health issue.
I want to,
Why
why
is
tattoo
tattoo
and body
accepted?
piercing an exception?
It was basically just removing as many uses as possible that might be considered undesirable for neighboring residents. It was pretty exhaustive, just removing uses.
Well, I can live with animal care, tattoos, and body piercing. Again, that's something, you're not going to have a line full of people
No.
waiting out the door. I don't know. I don't know what the consensus is, but
I think that's one that we would to also need to know from a health standpoint what requirements, because there are some health.
But they are
well-
licensed. They're licensed too, just like. Right. Okay.
All right, but also like this is like a zoning issue, but then on top of that, if there are state regulatory, that's going to lay on top. So it's like allowing it is one thing, and then whether they can accomplish what they have to do.
So why
for their-
give? So my thing is, I don't want to give someone a false sense of hope.
Got it.
That hey, you can do it, and then the state's like, no, you can't do it. So
All right.
that's why I'm just asking for that information.
So it sounds like what we have consensus on is take retail out for now because there's just not a clean path forward on that. We may need to be talking to our lobbyists in the legislature on that issue. Moving forward with these other types of businesses and doing that through this streamlined process that staff, I guess just combining the ACU live work piece, that was the staff. Then Councilmember Branch brought up the hours of operation. Why don't we just do 7 to 7? They said 7 to 8. Originally one was like 6 to 11. You said 7 to 6. Just do 7 to 7 and it's clean. It's 12 hours.
well, I'm just thinking if somebody's working till 7 o'clock at night and still want to get a massage. I mean, 7 to 8 or.
Well, staff
whatever.
said
There's-
8, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could live with 7 to 7 as a compromise.
That's what I was trying to do.
So,
All right, so 7, someone's taking notes on this? Okay.
yep, right there.
Okay, that's right. All right, so what is, from a
yes.
staff perspective, what else do you need direction on?
I think that's about everything. Really the clarification was whether or not there should be a special use permit or an administrative zoning permit.
No.
And then which uses should be allowed. I don't know.
So did we say administrative zoning then?
I thought we said we're going to take retail out completely.
Oh, so we don't even
So
need
we
it?
don't need that. Allow it by right with these limitations on the hours and signage, and then go from there.
And then can we?
So how do we know who's doing what if there's no special permit? How do we track it?
Here comes Mr. Young is running, I think.
Yeah, good afternoon, Pat Young with Plan Development. So the administrative process that Mr. Ananias described would be a permitting process. So we would have all the information about the use, the owner, the operations. We need to understand which category they qualify under. So we would be able to track it and manage it that way.
Right, but that's not like a hire a lawyer, all that.
That's correct.
Right, so we're still doing
Okay.
it, kind of like we would do with the
And
short-term
then the
rental
sign,
thing.
just to make sure the loop was closed, the signage was, staff recommended 6 square feet, which is, this is about 4,
Okay,
a little bit bigger than that.
that's fine. And then parking, did we figure out?
No regulations on
Yeah,
parking.
because I figured that's what I kind of figured.
Could we include animal care, tattoo, and body piercing? Get
I'm
rid of
fine with
those
that.
as exceptions?
I'm fine with that, and we'll just ask what Councilmember Branch said, just double back on the state requirements, and if we know already because of their licensing board that they'll never be able to make it into a at-home business, then we can just take it out, because I do agree that not the expectation, you don't want people to think they can do something when we know that they can't.
So I still oppose signage away from the house, like at the street with lighting on it. So I oppose that. And
Well-
then the question, then you want to talk about that issue? Okay.
I was gonna say, even though we talking about signage, we still have signage ordinance that they would still have to abide by.
Yes, can you clarify what signage would be allowed? Thank you.
Yeah, the bullet point in the presentation doesn't actually explain the details of the ordinance. So what it says in the draft ordinance is that the allowed signage would be limited to the building sign type of sign, which in the UDO, there's a number of different sign types that are defined: building signs, podium signs, pole signs. And so a building type sign is basically either a flat sign that mounts flat on the facade of the building. It can also be on an awning, so it can be printed on the cloth of an awning, or it can be what's called a blade sign, where it projects from the facade of the building on an affixed piece of material. So those are the basic types of building signs. Other signs would not be allowed for an ACU.
Right.
It says limits signage to 50 square feet in area. That's the
Are you-
planning commission's recommendation, not.
Okay. Are you looking at the actual the ordinance language or just the presentation?
No, it just said the planning commission recommendation contained the following changes, but
Yeah.
that's not what
So
y'all
I think,
recommend.
yeah, the ordinance
Okay.
language does specify that it's a building sign and refers to the portion of the code that regulates building
Okay.
signs.
And so, I'm sorry, but remind me in terms of the square footage or the space size, as well as the number of people that can work in one of these? How's
So
that determined?
the original draft ordinance was that there would not be a limit set by the zoning because the fire code establishes maximum occupancy according to square footage for various uses that are defined in the building code. And then that is something that we have recommended adding back in as the staff kind of compromise proposal, specifically because those building code exemptions that apply to the live work use as defined in the building code does specify a maximum number of employees and customers. And so we thought it would make sense to basically replicate those standards just to make it very clear, again, along the lines of what Councilmember Branch was saying, that the expectation set by the zoning should match the definition set in the building code.
If I might quickly add to what Mr. Ananias just said, these are really important provisions because Ms. Truman is correct, that the current code implies that you can't have any non-resident employees or customers. So I think this is a really helpful clarification about what's allowed.
So you're saying don't leave it to the fire code? We're going to put that,
I think we
which
would,
I think is
yeah,
a good idea.
we would directly embed it in the ordinance.
What about a daycare provider? Can someone do at-home daycare? Is that separate?
I think that's handled separately because people are already doing that. They already have home daycares. That's completely separate, and that's regulated by the state.
Home daycare is a defined use in the UDO that does not fall under the home occupation or live work definitions currently. It's a whole separate use, and it has all of the zoning districts where it's allowed listed out in the use table, because you could also have a home daycare in a mixed use district if you happen to have a house in a mixed use district. There is a requirement that home daycares in residential districts have a special use permit. And there's also a maximum number of children that can be served at one time, and it also does have to be licensed by the state.
Yep. I know that personally.
Yeah, I see hands. We're not going to take any more public comment at this meeting. Whatever we decide today is going to be on for public hearing in June. So there'll be. If you could email it to us, that would be great. Thank you.
All right,
Anything else?
let's,
All right. So I think we have consensus on how we want to push this forward then. The hours would be 7 to 7. We'll do the staff recommendation on signing, which is the awning or on the building, the size. I think we gave direction on what personal services to put back in, but we do want to check with the state requirements to make sure that they're feasible. We'll pull retail out, which hurts my heart, but I get it for now. So do we have, I guess, so moved? Is that a motion? Seconded by Councilmember Branch. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all so much for putting this together and for getting creative, Mr. Young. I know, especially working on this. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you back here at 3 o'clock. Good.
okay.